10-ish. Maybe we should get started. Are we good to go, Luther? Okay, so thank you all for coming. We are really excited because we recently basically joined a partnership with University Communication and some other entities on campus to subscribe to a really great social media listening and monitoring tool called NUVI. So it's kind of like Hootsuite on steroids, and Tyler will tell you more about it. But what we're trying to do is basically test it this semester and see how we can use it in our classes. We had talked about especially using it in our capstone courses that execute campaigns, for example, in our public relations campaigns courses. But there are probably other applications in whatever it is that you're doing. So Tyler has been working with some of our instructors already, and we're also doing this on the journalism and broadcasting side as well. So you've been working with Michelle Hassler. And so today, we just thought it might make sense to just talk a little bit about the tool and how we can use it in the classroom. And then overall, what we're trying to do is at the end of the semester, get some feedback from you and see if we can maybe, I don't know, write an article or do a presentation for other conferences or something like this, because we're one of only now four universities in the United States who are using this tool. And so that's probably all I need to say up to this point. So Tyler also is working with his interns and using this tool with real clients, and so that's why, this is could be really interesting. One of the things that we want to do is have two people in our college as sort of the go-to people, and so Stacy and Alan have agreed to be those people. Stacy will primarily monitor, I think, our data usage, because and Tyler will talk about this a little bit more, the way that this tool works is by data. So if we search for certain terms that will overload us, like for example Huskers, we may actually surpass the data that we have, million mentions a month, but they roll over. So Stacy will pay attention to that a little bit, and then also she'll be using it, of course, for all of the social media things that we're doing for our college. And then Adam, hopefully, will be the person who can kind of think through what might work in your particular classes, depending on what you're trying to accomplish with this, as we're all sort of learning this tool. So, hi Trina, come on in. Trina is carrying the torch for the broadcasting and journalism. That's awesome.
This is funny.
Yeah. So I think I'll just turn it over to Tyler, and we'll make this interactive, of course. And so he's pulled some specific examples of what this looks like. The overall goal for us is, if this tool works out, we're hoping to funnel it through our newly revised visual communication program that we're kicking off in the fall. So it has a really big visual data visualization, or is really a data visualization tool. So we're hoping that if we start funneling it through the freshman level courses and then keep building on it in the other courses, students will get out and be able to use really any social media monitoring tool that they may subscribe to in their job. So 1, 2, 3, go.
Yes, perfect. Sound okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. For those who I have met or who I don't know, my name is Tyler Thomas, and I'm an alum of this college, and I work in University Communications and have been the social media specialist for the university for the past 3 years. So I oversee all the social media communications from the university or the brand level, and I'm the chief listening officer, so that's my self-title, I call it. But I get to listen to what people are saying about the university and the university system, and then interact with those great comments, put out any fires that we have, and monitor any situations that maybe will be potential fires. And I'm going to show some of those examples today. I'm excited to partner with the college. In addition to partnering with the college, we do have some resource investment from Academic Affairs and ITS. So those are the 4 organizations that are currently putting in dollars to pay for this tool so that we can try it out until June. I put us on a 6-month trial. I don't like to commit to things for a full year and then halfway through be like, this stinks, it's not doing what we need it to do, and it's quite a big financial investment. One of the pieces that we did negotiate with them, at least for this first 6 months and continuing if we go on for a year, is we have unlimited users. So that's why it makes a lot of sense versus some of the other tools that you pay a certain fee per user. So maybe you're paying $10, but if you have a class of 20, that's $200. I'm going to go simple math because I'm not the greatest with it. But it's $10 is even too low. Most are cost way more. So right now we have unlimited users, and we can set them at different levels to where they actually can access the data and manipulate it, or they can just view it, report on it, and kind of have different levels. So I'm going to walk you through briefly kind of how I'm using the tool and how I think other groups can use it. Right now in this college, Michelle has been using it, Michelle Hassler in journalism, and then Yacht for one of their campaigns, one of their groups, the Shrine Bowl, is currently also set up in this tool. Over the next 6 months, kind of with the different stakeholders involved in this, Dean Marin, Vice Chancellor Askren, Vice Chancellor Green, and my boss, Meg Lauerman, the goal is to really try it out. Put as many miles on it as we can in 6 months and see what kind of case studies that we can get out of that. From an academic perspective, maybe there's an actual, this is how we use it in the classroom, this is how I use it for my personal research, this is how I'm using it at a brand level or kind of an institutional level. And the hope is to report on that and then say this is yes, we want to continue this investment, or maybe there's another tool that we need to use. But the goal is by June to have some success stories, or at least stories that say yes, we want to continue, or no, we don't. The nice thing for your college and for your students is because of the unlimited users, the only limitation that we have per month is we get 1 million mentions. And what a mention is we'll set up monitors based on keywords and phrases, and every time somebody tweets about that or mentions it on Reddit or posts about it on YouTube, it's a point. Think about it like minutes on your phone. So we get 1 million of those a month. That's a really big number. It really is, unless you're monitoring like the Super Bowl. Super Bowl is a little bit different. However, every month, if we don't use our 1 million, which the last month we haven't because it's been pretty limited, it rolls over. So throughout the summer when we're a lot slower, we could by September, we could have 10 million mentions to use. Right now we do have an account representative at the company who's available to answer more detailed questions, the ones that I can't answer, or help us with based on her clients and her recommendations. So right now her recommendation is keep going, put the foot to the gas and use the tool. Try to do it as much as you can. So what I'm going to display is just a few use cases that I've been using it for. And then I do have some ideas for other ones, and I do want this to be a dialogue. So if there's a question that I can answer or I'm not being complete on, I'll do my best or take a note, and we can follow up with Shayla, which is our contact. And then if you have some ideas, start taking notes too, because I think there's a lot of interesting applications based on your class, your classroom structures, the disciplines that you're teaching in, your own personal research or research groups that you're working on, books that you're writing. So there's probably a bunch of different ways that we can use this. And right now we are told to use it as, use it to the end. So.
And with grad students too, because we have a lot of grad students who are interested in doing social media research.
Yes.
Social media related research.
So to get started, I'm going to show an example that's kind of timely. So when you start a piece in NUVI, you start it with a monitor. It's what it's called. So I'm going to show you the monitor that I'm using right now. And this is a monitor around the Chancellor search. So right now I am trying to look for keywords and phrases that have to do with the current search for our next Chancellor. So as the release came out 2 Mondays ago, or when they announced, I am now searching, and I like to say the internet, not just social media, because it does cover RSS feeds and Reddit and YouTube comments and other commenting sections of websites. So it's not just pulling from Twitter and Instagram. Twitter obviously is probably the easiest to pull from because it's the quickest and lots of content is there. But it does pull from news sources that have open RSS feeds where the data can be pulled out by NUVI, and then they can run their different indexes on it. So for this example, I have inserted a bunch of keywords and phrases that if somebody uses this in their communication, digital communication in an open source platform, so if you have protected tweets, we're not going to see it. If you have a closed Instagram account, we're not going to see it. Or if they run an article on a website, a news site that doesn't have an RSS feed, we won't see it. So there are going to be some things we'll miss. However, we do get to see a lot, and we get to interact with them, and there's a lot of visualization with this data. So right now, if somebody mentions the phrase University of Nebraska and Chancellor, it will pull it in, and that's a mention. If somebody just says Chancellor search and the word UNL, it will pull it in. The difference between keywords and phrases, and this is where I lost, is right now it has to be University of Nebraska and the word Chancellor somewhere in the content. If you don't have a phrase in quotes, it'll pull in data like the word of. That's what I did my first search on. So I was getting a bunch of results for the word of. Not really helpful. And it was really killing my mentions. So the biggest thing to think through is what will people be using? What words are they using? What phrases are they using? What do we want to track? Because we can pull in a lot of things, but in this situation, I want to just see what is the conversation around this search. And you can always edit your monitor. You can add in new words. You can take out words. Right now, I am blocking out the phrase if it includes Germany, because I don't really care about the Chancellor of Germany. And I don't care about anybody that's talking about the Chancellor Scholarship, which is also being announced right now. So again, it's not that that the content's not, it's really just not valid for my search. It's still great content, but I can block those phrases out so I don't even have to wade through that data. You can also look at specific web addresses if you want to pull content from certain sites or block certain sites. I set up a search for ITS, and some of the results were all coming from product sales on Amazon and product sales on eBay. Not really relevant. The keywords worked, but it wasn't relevant, so we blocked those sites so that even if it mentions it, but if it has that site, kind of if-then statements, it will just not include it. Other mentions, some examples is like, if you're tracking the product Puma or the brand Puma, you probably don't care about the big cat, or other phrases to what Puma could stand for. Language options, they do have about 17 or I think quite a few languages that you can search for. I mostly search for English because that's the language that I can read and understand. But if you did have instances where you wanted to track other languages, I have not practiced this or tried this yet, but I do think it works. At least I've been told it works. Network options, I usually leave this very open because I want to know what people are saying across the internet. So we do have Twitter. They say that Facebook is here. What I will say up front is Facebook themselves have cut themselves off to third parties. They don't really regularly let their data of what people are saying flow into this tool. So it says it tracks Facebook, but mostly because of privacy settings, you can't actually see what people are saying. There is another part of this tool that we're still working on, kind of building out, called audiences. So we can do consumer research on Facebook, and it will say how many people have talked about BMW and the demographics of that and the other keywords or phrases. But Facebook is not allowing out who says it or what they actually say. So in that instance, we aren't able to use this tool to, unless you connect your own channel to have conversations, you aren't able to use this to monitor all of Facebook and like interact with people or give feedback. You can monitor your own page, so you can like plug in a specific Facebook page and see kind of what's being said, or like if somebody comments on your wall, just like you can with your own from the Facebook platform. But overall, you aren't going to see a ton of content coming from Facebook just because they have cut that off to most third parties. NUVI has allowed us to do audiences, which is a whole nother probably training and conversation. So if Facebook data is interested, if your research is interested in Facebook data, we can set up other monitors in their audiences tool to pull data. And they can, we want 50,000 mentions of a certain phrase or 50,000 mentions of a certain word. We can do that too. So this conversation is going to move off of that, but if we're interested in that or see a case study or a use case, let me know and we can chat about that as well. We can track certain mentions of certain profile names. Again, in this one, I don't really mind who's talking about it, but maybe you want to track mentions of certain influencers who maybe aren't using your keywords or phrases, but they often talk about you, or you're just trying to monitor from a PR perspective because every time that news source is saying something, you're hoping it's not about you, or you just want to kind of see what they have to say. You can ignore mentions from certain profile names. So if there are trolls or you're getting harassed or for some reason your keyword or phrase is still being used, I track Go Big Red or GBR. There are some people that use that for other instances or other uses. Right now I can't block them out. There's no way. So I can put it in here to say, don't bring in their mentions because 100% of the time what they talk about is not relevant to what I'm looking for. So a little bit of this is looking at the data and then refining your monitor. You probably won't get it right the first time, and you can constantly update it, which is really nice. We can limit if we want to just get data from certain geographic regions. If you just want to pull data from the United States, from a certain state, from a certain area across the world, if there's you can pick up to 5 locations based on country, and then it will let you segment down based on if it's broken into different states or territories. The only caveat with this is all based on user data, so they have to have location-based services turned on. So if you as a user have a Twitter account but you do not let Twitter know where you are, it can't pull in that data. So it's a kind of helpful tool if you want to just see, local election. We just want to see what's being said in Nebraska. Well, again, that data is only going to work if it's being pulled in from those who actually have location services. So I've kind of just turned it off and brought in everything, across the United States, and then I filter through the data and kind of see what's relevant. Likely, if it's a local local political thing or something that's happening in Lincoln, 90% of the time it's going to be local people anyway. So it's not really, there's really no point in blocking out the other areas because likely the data that's being pulled in based off your keywords, it will be relevant. Then there's some team permissions, and then there's some more information on how to set up monitors. So what right now we can do when we set monitors up is we can actually set up teams. So an example right now with Michelle Hassler's class is Michelle is kind of the lead on her team for one specific class, and then we have specific monitors set up for different student groups within her class that she's segmented, and then those students actually have access to the team and they can click into their monitor. So one of them is like homelessness in suburban areas and one's homelessness in rural areas. So they've set up their monitors slightly different using different keywords and phrases, and then those students have access to their monitors to get access to the rest of the suite of the tool. So I'll show you the rest once you set up your monitor. But this is kind of the first key. Other examples of monitors that I have set up when I've been practicing with it, especially from a journalism perspective, I think if there's when Jean Stothert was, she was getting a lot of slack from the first, she's the Omaha mayor, she was getting a lot of slack from the first snow day because the removal wasn't really going smoothly and there was a lot of people, or at least what I perceived to be a lot of people. I set up a monitor quickly just to see what people were saying about her, about Omaha, about snow removal. So really from a PR crisis, if you were on her team, you could monitor that. Or from a news side, if people are like, what are people talking about in Lincoln right now? Well, yesterday, I will say the announcement from CBS News about being a tech hub, probably huge. So from a news perspective, we can show the data of what's the volume of conversation, who's the huge influencers, what are the people talking about, what other key phrases are being used. So there's a lot of implications like that. Again, from a PR monitoring standpoint, there was an Omaha World Herald article that came out that we're not being the system is not being transparent about bids on buildings and prefacing other donors to get those bids. So I set up a monitor to watch that so that I could actually look and see, once it clicks in, I can see what's the influence. So I'll show you just based off that example. There is a date and time sort, so if you want to look very close, what's happening right now, or what's happened over the last 7 days when that article came out, I can visually see the spike of what was being talked about, how many authors. So we, from a crisis communications, oh gosh, everybody's talking about it, so many people. Well, but really it's not, 35 people. However, how much influence do those 35 people have? Are they people with 10 Twitter followers? Are they posting to blogs that don't have a ton of audience? Or are they really big, influential people like the Omaha World Herald that's talking about it? Makes sense, it's their article. But we can see from this data piece from the last 7 days, the spikes of when people were talking about it and overall sentiment, was it positive or negative? Sentiment, like anything, is it's a machine trying to tell if your phrase is positive or negative. So I trust it a little bit, but not as much, because if you say, go sign up for the career fair, it puts it as negative because you use GO all caps with an exclamation point. It seems like you're angry when really you're just showing enthusiasm. So oftentimes you'll have to click through and decide, what is the sentiment? Because the machine can't necessarily do that. But it does let you know what the reach is and what the spread, and you can click on any of these tooltips, to see what that means. Maybe if I just hover. So reach estimated by dividing the original post impressions by the average number of posts per a unique author, and the spread is estimated by dividing the retweet and reshare impressions by average number of posts. So you can actually see kind of what the reach and spread is. Again, from a news perspective, this could be a cool chart to show on the news maybe. That's what one other institution is doing that's using this tool. Further down, yes ma'am?
So say you wanted to see what the negative sentiment was, how would you see what those comments are?
Sure. So I'll jump there and then come back. So there's actually this nice stream where you can see, and it's kind of zoomed out because if I zoom too far in, it's going to mess up the camera. But you can see based on influence what people are saying. So a bigger circle, the more influence that person has. So this is a neutral comment, or they're saying it's neutral. If we think this is positive or negative, we can decide and move it if we need to. Red ones are going to be negative. So difference in challenge if you get the job. Mason, difference in the university system, very different. So right now I'm following everything Kate Howard says. So in this instance, I would probably just mark this as neutral because it's not relevant to the monitor. But I wanted to know what she was having to say. So you can actually click in this feed and do that. And you can drag and move kind of the the time and see what people are saying. On some of these, might have to go back a few. I don't remember when the story broke. But you can actually, sometimes you'll click on a circle and it will draw out lines to other circles, which is showing the connection to the original content that was shared and then how it's been reshared. So you can actually visualize who was the lead on it and then where it went. So this is the one feed that is really visual. Back on the overview tab, more data, but also still really interesting, especially if you're trying to run a campaign or looking for influencers, is you can see who has the largest spread and the largest reach, who are the influencers based on their score, kind of like a clout score. Anything over 50 they like to say is an influencer. Again, that depends on how you judge. But you can see where they're sharing. Is it on Tumblr? Is it on an article, RSS feed? What are some of the trending URLs? If you're trying to look to decide, how far has this spread? Are there other people reporting on it? One example I didn't set up because it's not my territory too, but right now Chick-fil-A and University of Nebraska Kearney would kind of be a really unique case study, and I wish I would have had time to do it, just to really see that volume. And I'm sure it's overlapping a little bit because right now everybody's saying it's University of Nebraska. They forget, in most headlines and most tweets, they forget the word Kearney. So really, from our standpoint, that could be an interesting way to measure that and say, what's the volume of content that's being shared? Who's sharing it? Is it a situation we should jump into? It could just be a nice use case for a class, just to say one decision from a student body actually influences the whole system, and that's my opinion, because it does influence the whole entire organization, not just their one campus. I don't have that example. I wish I did. The one thing with NUVI is it is real time. So when we want to set up a monitor, we have to do it quickly, or you have to be thinking before a release comes out, or if you know a big story is coming out, what keywords would make sense, because there's not a lot of historical data. It's always moving forward. It can pull about a month's worth of Twitter data for you. It goes against your mentions, which we're not worried about. So you can pull in a little bit of initial information, but it wouldn't work to be, I'd like to compare the hashtag today to 2012. You really can't do that. Their data doesn't pull that way. It only moves forward. So that's why, like, when I know releases are coming out or have kind of ideas of stories, I'll just set them up and then monitor them and then evaluate what's working, and then if the release comes out, start pulling in new keywords, new phrases that would make more sense to kind of refine the monitor, or set up different ones.
So if you were to put in the Chick-fil-A Kearney situation right now, it wouldn't talk about it from yesterday, or would?
It wouldn't. Right now, it would give you a preview about how much volume, but it doesn't actually give you the information. So I could use the tool and pull in historical Twitter data only, but right now a lot of that content's being shared across different websites and different blogs. It doesn't pull that. So that's where you have to be really responsive, and it's really easy to set them up. So as soon as you hear about something or know something's coming, or if you're running a campaign for a campaigns class, it's first step, what are the words that we should be tracking? So that's what we did with the Shrine Bowl. We sat down and discussed kind of what are the hashtags that you're using, what kind of phrases would make sense, what kind of phrases are we not interested in. So Shrine Bowl, Minneapolis, or other cities, not really helpful, but we want to know in Nebraska. So we did all that first. So initially when we set up that monitor, it was empty. There was nothing in it. But once they had their press conference, then we started to see the traction and started to see the content being filtered in. So it's all really based on what's happening real time. And mostly that's because they want you to listen, they want you to engage and know what's happening. That's why it's a little bit hard for research from a historical perspective, but if you wanted to look at something going forward, you could and measure it. And we can always turn these on and off. Other information or data that you can always download or look at is other trending keywords that are commonly used with these phrases, what languages are being used, locations, kind of lead sources. So again, Twitter is usually the highest, but maybe there's articles being posted on WordPress or Tumblr. You can decide where are people sharing content. Again, oftentimes we only monitor the platforms that we're on, but we realize that the consumer is on a lot more of that. So this provides us an opportunity to say, oh, as we're just monitoring brand terms, our terms keep coming up a lot on Tumblr. Maybe we should have a Tumblr account, or maybe that's where we should publish content, especially like the Snapple for NSAC. Just thinking that, is Snapple being used? Are a bunch of teens talking about Snapple? I know that's not your audience, but that would be a use case that you could actually use this to do a little bit of research on. So it could definitely be used for a little bit of research just to kind of get trends, again, from what's happening now going forward, and find influencers. Because again, influencers last month aren't as important as influencers right now. So this allows us to see in the kind of overview tab, other sections that it helps actually set the visualization is this compare tab, and this is what Michelle is using. I don't have another topic, but so she has 5 different monitors set up around different areas of homelessness working with NET. So she can plug in each of those and then actually see like separate bar charts for each of them. So she can see which one is kind of creating the most content and where things are. Maybe that's to go back and refine the search terms, or maybe rural homelessness is just not being talked about online as much as urban homelessness, which I'm assuming. But you can actually visualize all of that and make those decisions. You could also set up different monitors that had different topics. So you could say Lincoln and pothole in Nebraska. So the conversation about potholes in Lincoln is way higher than the conversation of potholes in Omaha if you were doing a story, or if you wanted to compare Snapple to Dr. Pepper. I know that they're not in the same category, or another Lipton iced tea, something like that. You can actually set those up and see. The map lets you see, again, based on user data that is being generated where people have it turned on. You can kind of see where most things are happening. No surprise that it's over Omaha. This is a conversation that's happening in Omaha. And then there's this burst, which I'm going to switch to a different monitor before I show you that. So this is a monitor that I currently have suspended, but I have permission to talk about it because I think it's a good PR case study. Amanda Gailey is a faculty member in the English department, and she's also the director of Nebraska's for Reformed on Gun Control. She's a very big gun control activist, which is great, and we appreciate that. However, about a month ago, end of December, there was a court case in another city where police officers were exonerated from killing a young African-American man. And she was very upset about that. So she went to her Facebook page and, sorry about the language, but used the F word a ton. And it was brought really close to F the police, F lots of things. So again, people like to skim, and if they see the word F and police, they put them together and don't read the whole thing. So that kind of became a storm for all of us, because also next to her Facebook profile is professor at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. So again, just like Chick-fil-A, people jump onto whatever they would like and then discuss it. So we actually set up a monitor. This is the first thing I did with this tool. Once, again, the story happened, I set the monitor up around her name. So we'll look about, I'll go year to date. You can see the spikes of what content was being said, and I can see what the overall reach, who are the authors. I can decide from this conversation kind of and let her know that her personal decision as a First Amendment right does have influence on the university, or does affect the university and her place of employment and her safety. So part of this was monitoring also for keywords. In the monitor you can set up trigger words. So if this word is used, text me. So we had to set up trigger words around death threats or other threats maybe to her life or her family, because some people get really heated about gun control, as you can assume. So this tool allows us to do that, and it would actually text me if somebody used those phrases. They weren't used. It was actually good because there wasn't any death threats. But we could use it kind of as a PR crisis management tool, but also help her realize, like, these are the key people talking about you. They have a large influence, especially this person. Are those people that we should reach out to? In this case, we didn't do any reaching out, but you can think of different use cases about this. Or maybe there's a scandal or something that you want to cover and you want to talk about it, or you want to at least have the research for it. You can use this tool to do that. And I think that's really interesting. With that, we can see this burst and actually see the other words that were being used. Hopefully this, I don't know at the time. I might have to do it in a report. Let's see what Cloud does. Oh, that's why. Excuse me. So other trending keywords around her: trash, gun violence, Obama. Another big thing is she was invited by Obama to come to the presentation at Baxter Arena the same day that this came out. So it was, then UNO everybody thought she was a UNO professor. So there was just a lot of different angles around this. But from me, from a monitoring perspective, it was kind of gold. From a job perspective, it really sucked. But the rest of it. So we can actually see kind of, is UNO actually getting a lot of attention? In this sense, 8%, 24 occurrences, not a ton. But we got about her rant. We can look at this burst. We'll go year to date again. and we can see other phrases used around her, like F star star, and then it will let us go in and see which keywords were being used around that, other phrases that maybe we want to add to our monitor and search. So like maybe we wanted to add this plus her name. So again, we're not going to find every single mention of F the police, but her name and that mention, those two phrases together would bring in a search, and so we could see more data, all of these types of opportunities. So this is all interactive, so you can actually click in and learn more about every section and see some of the sample mentions of what people were talking about. So to me, this is a good case study of how we can actually measure that what was being talked about, what was being said, who was saying it, and visualize all of that. So, and then just generally, I also have one set up for the university just from general brand management. And I can kind of see what's the trending keywords and phrases, and if any kind of news article. Let's go last 2 days. So kind of a cool visualization, or if you're running a campaign and you want to see where how the hashtag is trending or something like that, and sometimes this gets a little stuck, we can do all of that. So the other pieces with this is if you did have a social media account, Michelle has been thinking about maybe using this for, what's the group? Not Montage. Mosaic. She's thinking about using this for them in the fall because you can actually, in your account, sync social media accounts that if you did want to interact with the content. So you could see the content, but you could also respond to it, reply to it, retweet it, make a comment if it was an Instagram post. You can actually sync those accounts with that if you have access to them. So you don't have to. You can use this in a classroom where you're not actually responding, but maybe you want to use that as like a, hey, how would you respond to this? And they write it out on a notebook or on their computer.
Or Stacy could use it on behalf of her college.
Correct. So like for Stacy, who has access to actual accounts, she can sync it up and use it that way. She can set up content that she'd like to share and publish, but it's not required. So that's the one thing that's a little bit different, is this is giving us a larger reach of what's being said around online versus like a Hootsuite or a Sprout Social or more social media content only. I would say this is probably not the best tool. If you just want to write content, schedule content, and publish content, this is way more than you need. But it allows you to do that in addition to tracking what's being said around a certain topic or mentions. So it does allow a little bit more depth to what you're working on. So if you're just working on an assignment this is how you schedule posts, I maybe wouldn't set you up with NUVI. It's too much. This is the BMW. You probably need to forward.
Would this be a great tool for Yacht to test how their campaigns are working?
It is. So we're testing it with Shrine Bowl right now.
Oh, that's right.
So yeah, so we're doing it with kind of small groups right now just to kind of see. And it was good timing because I had met with Amy and she was like, we're about to launch this thing, let's do it. So that's where we have to be thinking a little bit ahead, or at least being really quick. If an article comes out, we have to be ready and set up a monitor. So an article, a story, something's coming out, we have to be either thinking ahead and knowing what the keywords are, or
But if
be
they're
ready.
placing an ad and then see how it.
Exactly.
Right, the launching a campaign.
Yep. So around certain keywords or hashtags.
Did you check your craft beer book?
I have not. No, I haven't used this for personal use yet. I've kept it strictly professional because I'm not paying for it.
Tyler, did you have a monitor when the chancellor's kind of response to Black Lives Matter?
I did.
Lincoln Journal?
I did. Yep.
Did you look at it?
Mm-hmm.
Be really interesting too if we're running campaigns in different phases to adjust, especially the social media as it's happening, and figuring out which channels work better than others.
So I always put the date in because that lets me know when I started it. I mean, it'll tell you too, but so when the chancellor sent out his response to the Black Lives Matter, his comments on that for, I don't remember when that was, so I'm going to go back a little further. I can see all of that around those phrases and who was talking about it, who was involved. Again, from my perspective, it's kind of brand management and watching and seeing if there's any kind of potential crises or things that we need to respond to. And so this allows me to do that. I had to wait for the article to be out, or I had to know it was coming. So like the building bids, I had no clue what was going to be said or how it was going to be said or what was going to be included. So as soon as the article came out, I just pretty much read the abstract, read the first paragraph, and pull out keywords and phrases from that, and then hope that your monitor does well and just tweak as you go. Some of the content you will get is not relevant So that's why it's a lot of data, and you have to be able to kind of go through it. But it does give you a good snapshot of like what's being talked about. Again, this negative sentiment, I haven't gone back here and updated it, so it might not be as negative as we think, especially because the hashtag was not at UNL, which could be not at UNL we're doing this, or not at UNL, so a machine can't read that. So my guess is most of this negative sentiment is probably around assigning, but I can go back and change that. And I don't mean change that to make me look better, but change it to actually reflect what the content is saying. And when you actually print a report, which we have unlimited reports too, I'll show you. Who's back there? I might have to. I don't know if this will let me submit it without a name. So we'll go the last 14 days. It might make, nope, doesn't make you do a name. So it'll analyze it real quick. And this still, if you email this, you can actually still have the interactions with it, that chart that moves. You can click on it, or you can download it as a PDF. All of this content is very clickable, so if you were to provide a report, provide feedback, you can actually edit this. Again, I don't mean edit it to change it in the sense of make it better for yourself, but maybe the mentions of some things aren't necessary or aren't really helpful. We could do that and turn it on and off. You can see what the sentiment is, you can see what people are saying or who the influencers are. You can drag and drop some of this stuff. You can jump to sentiment. So looking at this phrase, this is what it, based off what the chart did. So if I went and edited it because of some of the positive things that were marked negative or vice versa, I can switch that. I can see who my influencers are. So in this situation, maybe there's a ton of students who are feeling really upset about the situation or negative. That would be an opportunity for us to provide those names or something and maybe reach out to them and talk to them. Or maybe it's for a campaign. They're the greatest people to push out your content and help your content get further to their audience. We can look at location. Again, this is probably only in Nebraska. And actual conversations. What are people talking about? What other phrases are being said with those things? And then here's the actual mentions that are included below. So you could trash them if they aren't relevant. Some of them are not because there was a lot of other things going on that week too. So again, you can't trust the data fully. You have to kind of click through and realize what people are saying. But you can actually see how many people are saying what they're saying. So if you wanted this to email to you at the end of every month, end of every week, you can just have a report and then look through it and decide what you want to report on, which is really nice kind of automation part of this. But I always have to look through the data because University of Nebraska just gets pulled into a lot of things. So sometimes it's really helpful or sometimes it's really not.
Are those mentions in that area, all of them? Because earlier when we had the burst, I think it said you can just look at sample mentions.
Samples. It's not everything, no.
Okay.
I don't think it's, and I don't know if it would be necessary to have everything. A lot of this is trying to do sampling and kind of give you the overall.
I was just thinking in terms of research, if we wanted students to, they wouldn't have to have a complete data set.
Correct.
Yeah,
They would or wouldn't?
They would.
Yeah. Well, then that's the thing with Facebook audiences is you can say, I would like to track these conversations, these keywords, and then you can say, I'm comfortable with about 30,000 mentions if you wanted to take a sample, and we can set that up too. It's a different part of this tool, and we get 3 of those at a time. So that's another conversation to have, but we can be doing that as well. So from a research perspective, I think Facebook's really helpful. If you wanted to do a response to Facebook reactions, how many people are talking about that, or what are they saying, which could be a project. You could say, I want my sample size to be 100,000, or I want it to be 5,000. They say 15,000 is usually a good sample because you put in keywords and phrases and set that up as well. And then that will extract only Facebook data. So if your research area or your student group or a graduate student is interested in that, we can talk about that as well. So this could be set up.
Does it export to Excel format for the charts?
Yeah, everything exports. I have not exported to Excel because I've used this, but sorry. We can download the PDF, and then I know in the close overview, there is some, I can't read what that says, zip. It's a CSV, so yes, so you can, and now I'm going to have to go back to my computer and move back to the other one. Actually, no. I can jump back this way.
So I know you said the audience part is another conversation, but in general, what type of data you can pull for the audience profile? I know you can track who said what, but
For Facebook?
Yeah, for Facebook.
It's very similar to what you can see in the other part of it, but there's a little bit more section. So I'm not as familiar with that because I haven't played with it yet. So if you're interested in that, let me know and we can set up another another meeting. I'm here. Or I can have Shayla walk you through it too. So we have unlimited access to Shayla. I'm kind of the gatekeeper just so that she doesn't get inundated with emails and we can keep communication constructive. But she will walk you through anything you'd like and we can set that up. And with that, the nice thing is we get 3 at a time. So maybe you just want to pull a sample about something that happened today. We turn it off and then you can start another one. So monitors, we have unlimited. But for Facebook audiences, which is technically another tool, another thing that we're paying for, we get 3 at any given time. So there is some really cool data, and I do think the example she showed me was BMW, which is kind of a luxury brand, so the data is a little bit more nice. I don't know for some of the things we'd be searching for if it would be as clean, but there are really interesting things that can talk about demographics and volume of keywords that are being used and other phrases that maybe would be good research for as you're copywriting or thinking for different pieces. You could add that in as well.
Yeah, I'm more thinking about research, putting Facebook profile, sort of as a baseline kind of model, predicting behaviors.
Yeah, we can see what it can do. They are, I would say, a newer tool that's still developing a lot and trying to figure this out. We're one of like 5 educational institutions and only one in Big Ten that's using this tool. So we do have a little leverage, I think, with we got a lot of leverage with how much we're paying for it. And I think there's always, if there's something we want, we can always add it to a list and let them know. And if they see that as something that's beneficial to all of their customers, or at least to us, maybe they'll add that to their list for the engineers to develop.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, perfect.
So to access this, do we go through our normal, like your account at UNL, or do you have to always be on campus?
Sure, so this is all web-based. It works the best in Chrome. It does work in other browsers, but it tends to freeze for some reason. So I am not a big fan of programs that only work in one browser. However, this is what we are right now. So again, the ebbs and flows of newer businesses. The way it works, actually, Sriani, is we'll set you up an account, and then what's what I'm going to work with Stacy and Adam to do so that Stacy can be more your contact for administration pieces. I'm always available for questions, and if consultations are getting to Shayla. But right now, I've been setting everything up, and I think we're going to have Stacy help out with that. So what we can do is set you up an account, and then if there's like a team that you want to build, like we did with Michelle, it's just working with Stacy again to get other people added as necessary. So like for Michelle's class, I think it's 20 students, 4 groups. We have 1 person assigned for each, so they have 4 monitors. So we only have 1 user for each of those teams, but you can cross-use passwords and names. So if for a class you foresee this working and then you want to use it down the road, Brian and I have talked about this, kind of setting up like R Brown 1, R Brown 2, R Brown 3, and then you kind of give out those usernames and passwords to certain groups so that at the end of each semester we're not going through and deleting 40 students and having to add in new students. We can self-manage that, but we'll see how that goes as people start getting in the system. But we can set you up a team and you'll have access. As of now, all of your students that get added would not have access to edit the monitor. So if there are cases where you'd like them to have more access, we just have to know and then we ask Shayla to update it on the back end of the tool. That way you as the administrator can kind of oversee, because we only have 1 million mentions across all of us, you can kind of help keep that organized. But like for Michelle's class, we opened it up because they're kind of tweaking things back and forth to refine, which right now isn't a problem because we're not at our, we're not hitting our measure at the end of each month. So right now, contact me and we're going to work with Stacy to get her up to speed to do that.
Do you have some thoughts on common search terms that we may want to exclude at this point?
Exclude?
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to say because like Go Big Red is really, like GBR I search, but like I've blocked out any mentions from the United Kingdom or the United Kingdom because it's Great Britain and Australia because of the Great Barrier Reef. So it's really kind of trial and error. You have to kind of just figure out what works and what doesn't, and then maybe you want to use GBR plus another phrase or another word, which then makes it a phrase. So those 2 words now have to be together. So it's a little bit difficult. And you can set up multiple monitors. So like if you wanted to just follow, so maybe you have a campaigns class and you just want to track the hashtag, and then you want to track all the other keywords, you could have 2 to make it a little bit easier to visualize, or you can put them together. As of now, we have no limits on how many monitors we set up. It's just thinking through which keywords and phrases would provide you the data that you're looking for.
So I have a question for you. Ryan Rothman is on my Bateman competition
Mhm.
team, so I think he's an intern,
Mhm.
right? So they're going to be starting some things next week.
Yep.
I think it'd be really interesting for them in terms of their overall strategy to even be able to monitor what's being said on kind of related topics on campus, because they're recognizing to even get any kind of like share of voice is probably just going to be really difficult.
Sure.
So to even be able to have that data to then put in their final project that they submit to PRSA, I think would be, not only helpful to kind of explain what they tried to do, but then also make a case, and I think have data that most teams wouldn't have.
Definitely.
So
Yep.
if
Those are
Ryan maybe could work with
Yeah,
you.
so those are use cases. So right now we're having the faculty and or instructor kind of lead it. So even my interns right now, Ryan's technically not mine, but my interns have to work through me to do it. So for Ryan and Bateman, what I would say is just you contact Stacy and we'll get a team set up, and then they'll have access. Mostly just from a simplified workflow. I just don't want to have us, some people go to me, some people go to Adam, some people go to Stacy, and then we kind of lose control of it. But what I would say for Ryan and for the rest of the class is to be thinking about what keywords and phrases would make the most sense to track, because that is the first step that you have to take to leverage the tool at all. And they could set up too, before and after, kind of like, these are general words, and then these are our campaign-specific hashtags or words that we're trying to see, current and future, what happens or what gets used.
And then just separately, maybe I'll leave it something. We'd love to talk with you about your digital content class,
Mhm.
because this kind of social listening from the agency where I used to work at Alman, they're saying this is what they want kind of all entry-level assistant account executives to know how to do. And like they'd have them come in and just do this all day long. Probably for maybe even, I don't know, either one account or who knows,
Yeah.
many accounts. But that, like when I'm teaching 451, we talk about this, we don't have a tool like this. But so to me, it should definitely be probably an even growing part of class. And so even to talk to you about how then we structure it, so that when you teach digital content and Brian's teaching social media and if
Yeah.
I'm teaching my PR techniques class, they all are really consistent, but then you can see kind of how you could even use the tool in different ways or get
Sure.
we're smart about the curriculum.
Yeah, and I think that's a bigger curriculum, because like right in my class we talk about listening and engagement, but I don't even introduce tools.
Okay,
Well, ultimately, we want to start in the fall in the NUVI courses.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, they will get an introduction, very easy sort of basic introduction as part of that and as part of our new social media lab.
Okay.
Yeah.
So definitely, I think they're the larger curriculum questions, because I think there's great overlap, and there's a lot to learn. Like the keywords and phrases are the most simple, but they're also the most difficult, because sometimes the data can be really skewed if you mess up one word,
Right.
or you get no data. And then it's also how do you present this, and how do you actually, like all data, how do you synthesize it and say this is the actual results of said campaign, or this is what's actually being talked about. Is this spread and reach a big enough deal to react or respond? Or
I'm just interested, does that even kind of give you some indication that it did not maybe have the traction? Or I'm not, like for me, it's like that was a significant response. It's really important for, the chancellor, I feel like, came out and said what he said. And that, I don't know why I would have expected bigger numbers, but maybe
Sure.
maybe you have data then to put that into context and say, no, that's pretty much what we'd
well, and that's kind of how I've been using the tool because of my role. Was that a big deal or not a big deal? I mean, because there are some people who are like, that was the worst thing ever, and then you're like, actually, just to you, it was the worst thing. It wasn't. Or crap, it really is bad, and we need to react, or we need to respond. I mean, athletic type things, those usually get the largest because there's so many more people interested in them. But the Amanda Gailey thing, I think, is a great example to say, there wasn't a lot for us to necessarily say or respond, but we could track the conversation from a safety, but also from an impact on the brand. Like right now, the Chick-fil-A thing is not ours, but it's ours. Like we are associated with at every single level, and it does affect my job, and it affects everybody else because we don't want to not say like, oh, it's Kearney, just worry about them, because really, every time somebody says University of Nebraska, they think of us first. So it's kind of an interesting case study. Right now we don't have any responses. We just kind of funnel them over to Kelly Bartling at UNK to deal with, because that's her role. But I think there's a lot of applications for it, and I think it could be really fun. And the nice thing is we have unlimited access pretty much, minus the mentions that we have to deal with. But
And if we wanted to get into the craziness of what's happening to Apple,
yeah.
We could.
Well, and I think with Apple, it was just, to that one, you search the word apple, but exclude fruit. that's probably too much information, but being really refined, like Apple and law or Apple and FBI, like,
Code or something, yeah.
yeah. And that's where I see like a journalistic or a news approach is you could be really responsive and see what people are saying, and maybe pull a sample or maybe do a case study for a class, because like Fraka said, we're going to have all these people coming in, freshmen, who are going to need things to look at. So maybe it's just setting up these sample monitors, there's all the data, and then it's, hey, go look at it, what do you think? What would you say to this response? Or what would you, identify who the key influencers are, because we can run monitors and then turn them off. And then so they're not still pulling data, but all the data is still there. So we never delete a monitor. That's the one thing, don't delete it, never delete it. Because we could just add them to like a freshman team or a new student team. And they'd have access to all the monitors to look at them, look at the data, but they wouldn't be able to manipulate them. And especially if we have them turned off, they wouldn't be pulling new data. So we could, almost like a summary or a scholarly article, this week, log in, go look at this, and pull out these 3 things, or what you think is the most interesting, or what you would respond to that tweet or that message, or who are the key influencers, identify that. Because I think those are things, like you mentioned with Edelman, they're probably going to have to understand or look for, or at least be aware that these things are available.
Yeah. Well, I'm even thinking like for Apple, I feel like there's key parts of this story that just aren't getting coverage or aren't being covered in a way that most Americans can understand it. And so then when you have polling, like when Tim Cook was interviewed on ABC Nightly News or whatever, and he says, X% of people think you should write the code and just unlock the door or whatever, it's like, well, the information, like from a PR perspective, we would say if we're representing Apple, the key information hasn't gotten out anywhere. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To understand. So sometimes it's to identify gaps.
Yes,
information,
definitely.
Know where to fill.
Mm-hmm. Lots of different uses.
Yeah.
I have a different question, because I was reviewing some papers dealing with large volumes of tweets and such. And one in particular, for example, that they were looking at the social media comments, the mentions, and the sentiments, actually, relative to nuclear energy and issues associated with that. And they compared it to how it was treated in the traditional media, which was kind of interesting. So my question, though, in that case, they were dealing with 20, 30 million tweets. I mean, what did you say that there
We have 1 million mentions a month, so we could not deal with. We could set it up for like a day.
Because they started out with 30 million, came down to about 20 million, which was wonderful then to be able to
Yeah.
have. The other thing is, can you pull that out then to then use to make other kinds of comparisons? Because then they put it into other sorts of, structural equation modeling, all these different kinds of things to compare it to.
Sure. So I mean, what this tool could do is you could set up a monitor for renewable energy versus another energy, like if you had 2 monitors and see volume of content. But what we would probably have to do in that case, if we know, when you set up a monitor,
there are other tools at that volume that you use. Like this is going to give you like a skin to visualize it. That person, there's other tools like NIP that gives you access to the raw data of a structure for you. So he's probably doing something like that. Pay for raw data and it'll handle it. Whereas this gets the data and then it kind of gives you an interface for it. If that makes any sense.
and you can.
How would you use this relative to your research overall? Is this more just for
You
Or
get the
pilot
CSV
testing?
files like Jamie was asking.
That's why I asked, can you download to Excel and then you can segment it.
Right. Yeah.
You can segment by audience, you may want to compare maybe activists versus government, right? Based on, data you can collect about the audience, the sources, right? So that's, I asked you whether you can download to Excel file and then what kind of audience data you can pull,
Yeah.
right? And then sort of segment the data.
So you can't do that.
So the nice thing too is when you set up a monitor, it will over here, before you can publish it, it will give you a preview of what, in the past month, those phrases garnered this much content. So on news stories, 0. On other stories, it will kind of tell you what you're looking at it will give you a preview before you hit it. So if it says, that's getting 30 million, you probably don't want to hit go because that's going to blow our number. That's why we're only letting faculty right now at that level until it's communicated to students that they can't affect those monitors just yet. But we also could set it up for 2 days, and we'll set it up for 2 days and then turn it off and you can pull that data. So maybe it's just setting up a sample time. But there are going to be some limitations because of the way the money is being pulled and the way that we have access for everybody, that we couldn't just say one researcher who wants to pull in 40 million gets priority at this point.
Would it make sense for us to think about maybe a guideline number in terms of mentions?
Per month.
Per month, per
I mean,
faculty member? So
I mean,
that
if you're seeing over 50,000 or 100,000, I mean, that's where you'd want to be. But right now, I mean, over like total, we're fine.
But if Lori were, or somebody else, were to put in a search term and you kind of, and it's like, well, okay, it's not 30 million, but it's pretty large. I'm not
Yeah.
totally sure if I should run it. Or should they contact Stacy
Yeah.
before they do?
I mean, right now it's going to be, I would say, faculty, staff, instructors running it. So we just have to kind of figure out what that number looks like. Again, there's not a lot of people in it right now, so we have a ton of mentions. So I don't want to say, I mean, I would say 50,000. If it's over that monthly,
Check with.
just check. But I mean, 50,000 really isn't that much, because if each of us did 50,000, I'm not the best with math, but we got a lot of 50,000s to use up to $1 million.
So would this automatically give you an alarm if you so close to the limit?
It will give me an alarm as an administrator, but it won't give you an alarm.
So
No.
somebody can theoretically kind of mess up the
Yeah.
system.
Well, I mean, theoretically, yes. I mean, that's why we have a simple guideline.
Have some kind of.
A simple guideline of 50,000, but the other piece that we have is we have rollover, just like minutes on a cell phone or used to be, that we're acquiring more and more. And if we go over a month, so let's say we go over $1 million, well then we just lose the next month. So it will just roll over, at least right now. If we come to a point where we're hitting $1 million every month and we're like, we need to bump, we just bump our account and then justify that to get more funds to do so. So right now we're not doing that, so I can't say we need more money, but I think there would be a case for that to say, hey, we're going to do this for a campaigns class, and this client, it'll cost you $2,000. I mean, there is a sense where we could use this model to actually generate revenue so that we can use the tool, because right now if you do a campaigns class for a local business, they are getting a lot of data and a lot of information for free. So, I mean, way more than, my classes will write a few tweets for your account and post a few things on Facebook.
Yeah, but I think this probably won't be more of a problem for teaching when you hand it over to students. They track, anything on your leader, very common brand like Apple.
Yeah.
So if there will be some sort of control we can place there, this is the threshold for this class, this is how many mentions they can pull.
Yes.
Then I think that would be very prudent to do before we roll it into a full curriculum kind of a tool.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and right now, like, this is saying low battery, I think. Right now, the thing is, too, like, we just need to see who's using it. I mean, Michelle's the only one right now, and Yacht are the only two in. So if we go at the end of the semester, if everybody comes back and goes to their curriculum and says, I want to use it, we just take a simple number and divide, and we can figure that out. Right now, I have no understanding, because if only 2 of you use it, you can have 300,000 a month, because we're not getting enough, and we have $1 million. So it really just depends on how this ebbs and flows for the class. What I would say is we can't probably open the door for all students to have access to set up whatever they want, because even the keyword of Apple isn't really helpful unless I don't know what research you're doing to just find out how many times is the word Apple used. Probably not the most refined and probably should go back. So even Huskers, that hashtag is pretty popular and gets used a lot, but are you just looking at volume? If that's the case, maybe this, like Adam said, this isn't necessarily the tool for you, but if you're trying to actually get more information, then this is probably the tool that would work. So I don't think it's a silver bullet for everything. I use this from a big brand monitoring. I don't right now use this for the publishing, just because I like the tool. The other tool I'm using that I think is better at it, and it's pretty cheap.
As you said earlier, I think the goal right now is to explore and to just use it and see, and some things may work great and others may not, and just if you can keep notes on all of that, that would be really helpful, and then at the end we can come back, have another meeting like this and figure out, okay, how do we want to refine this? Maybe you discovered something that we haven't talked about at all.
Yeah.
That's really cool and easy to set up. Also think about, as you're putting this into the hands of your students, what their comments are, what they're struggling with, what's maybe intuitive to them. I think all of this would be very helpful.
Yeah, and like Adam, Stacy, and myself will be here to support you. So as you're thinking through ideas, I mean, we can turn monitors, turn them on, turn them off, add more. We can have a lot of interesting, hopefully a good interesting case study by the end so that we can say, yep, this tool is working and we want to continue the investment, or no, but we learned a lot. This is actually what our short list of what the new things we want to be able to do, and we go and look at another tool. That's why I only signed up for a 6-month contract, because I want to make sure that what we've committed to with our state dollars is actually beneficial to us at all levels. So students, the brand, research, and ITS.
So do we have it through June 30th or mid-July?
June 30.
Okay, because some of you are teaching summer class, so that would be another way to
Yep.
test it.
I mean, and if we needed to keep going, we could pay the monthly fee. But right now, our contract allows us to stop. We no longer owe them money. I think June 15th, actually, because I think we started December 15th is when the
That-
contract
okay,
started.
June 15th, okay.
Yeah, it's not an actual.
So for those of
The
you
month's off a
teaching
little
in
bit.
pre-session,
What's the other tool that you use that you mentioned?
Sure. So I use Sprout Social from a more day-to-day basis. The limitations with that is I can only follow 15 keywords. So really, those are like the highest level brand keywords and geolocation from Instagram that I can use for my individual engagement and posting. So that's kind of how I use that. This is more of the high-level data, find the influencers, see what the actual conversations are. So I use those tools kind of together. To me, they cover both things. NUVI is still figuring out publishing, but I don't think that's their strength right now. Their strength is really scouring more of the internet and understanding what people are saying around these keywords and these phrases. Yep.
I think I see a role in 283 too for this tool for us, for our students, as a listening tool, straight up listening tool.
Well, and that's where like we could set up monitors for a month that are just almost like an assignment, and we just turn them off, and then you can log in, log out, and use the data, if that's what you wanted to do, or set up new monitors. That's the nice thing is we can turn them on and off, and we can add as many as we'd like. We're not limited on that. We just can't do giant research projects with 40 million right now. Oh, 20. That'd be like 2 years worth of stuff, so the rest of us would just sit for 2 years. So. All right. Well, if you have other questions, thank you very much. I know we're at 11. And thank you for joining us on a Friday. I know these are work days.
Thank you
Yes.
for doing this.
No problem.
It's very helpful.
Yeah.
So 1, 2, 3, go. And Stacy will get you a
Yes, ma'am.
username.